Chapter 2. God Works Through a United Self. I and the Father are one. I know you have read the story of the prodigal son many times, but read it again in this search for you. And he, Jesus, said, A certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me a portion of the goods that falleth to me. And the father divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed the swine. And he would have fain have filled his belly with the husk that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no longer more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found. And they began to be merry. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants, and asked what these things meant. And the servant said unto them, Thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him safe and sound. And the elder son was angry, and would not go in. Therefore came his father out, and entreated him. And he answering said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment, and yet you never gavest me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son is come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And the father said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad, for this thy brother was dead, and is alive again, and was lost and is found. Do you read it merely as a story? If so, you miss the point. It is a parable which the metaphysicians call the mirror of humanity. As you stand before the mirror, you will see not only a true reflection of yourself, but also what you must do to change the things that you find wrong. The parable is about you. It is about every man. It is the story of a young man who binds himself by his own freedom. You too make your own fetters. The prodigal son wanted something he did not know he had, but he did not know himself. He had not examined the life for which he was made and the reason for his being, but he wanted as desperately to find himself as you do. This impetus to search for the true self is a tremendous God-given urge which demands satisfaction. The prodigal said to his father, Give me the portion of the goods that falleth to me. Or, I am of age now, and I want to see life. I want to have a good time. How can a fella get anywhere around here? There are too many restraints. There is too much discipline. I want my freedom. Have you too not made unjustified demands on life? Demands based on taking, not earning, or getting, not giving, on receiving, not sharing. So away he went. He separated himself from his father. He was tired of the old home. He sought a different kind of life. He sought happiness, greater satisfaction and thrills, but he didn't find them. He sought freedom and found bondage. He sought the satisfaction of the flesh, and he found a pig's trough. The more he sought, the less he found. I'm going to live my own life, he said, but he was thinking only about the part of his life that appeared on the surface. He had given no thought to the emotional, mental, and spiritual hungers that are beyond and above the personality. Everything went wrong. He was miserable and homesick. The thought of his father and of his home worked constantly before him, and it was his homesickness that saved him. Deep in your heart, too, is a longing for a full life, or you wouldn't be reading this book. That persistent search for God, for true peace, for the spiritual self is inherent in man. We instinctively know that our true home is with the Father who made us, and we are homesick when we separate ourselves from him. No one told the prodigal son to leave home. No one forced him into that far country. It was his own choice. Hills are always greener far away, but the country produced no hills so green as those at home, and he wasted his substance in riotous living. His materialistic thinking reduced him to penury and want. He had to seek help from anyone who would give it to him. Do you see how dark Jesus is painting this picture? Here is a young man who had everything and traded it for nothing. He joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed swine. Note the word sent. He wasn't taken to the fields, he was sent. Where now was his independence and freedom? And what wages did the citizen offer? Apparently none, for Jesus said he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat. Imagine that. He was so hungry that he would have settled for pig's food, but no man gave unto him. Why not? Because that is the way personality acts. Did you ever get into a spot in which every door seemed closed, and you turned from one person to another for help, and found in the end that no man gave unto you? Is it any wonder that the prodigal's thoughts keep turning back to the great sufficiency in his father's house? And when he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? When he came to himself, this was the turning point, the great awakening. He now took stock. What am I doing out here in this terrible place? How did I get here? This isn't my true home or the way I'm supposed to live. I don't belong here. I should like to go home. Well, why don't I go? No one here will stop me. I am going home. I shall tell my father I was wrong. I shall accept whatever he gives me. I'll work to regain my place in his heart. The prodigal has looked at himself. He knows that he must change. He acknowledges that his trouble and despair are self-inflicted. To get back to his home and to enjoy its benefit, he realizes he must take action. He has proved that he cannot look to others for his good. When he came to himself, when you open your consciousness to truth, you discover that in reality you have never been away from your Father's house at all. You have merely tried to locate your good outside of yourself. Living away from God, seeking material things external to you, you have let the resources of your lower self dry up and are compelled to seek that which is above and beyond you. The Father had given the Son what he asked. He divided unto them his living, but he did not compel him to remain at home. Why not? Because man has individual volition and choice. He can do what he pleases and go where he chooses. Have you too not learned that by a many better experience? And when he came to himself, he said what? To whom? He was talking to himself. Whoever heard of such a thing? Does a sane man talk to himself? Does he put the I on the other side of the table and the me on the other, and then have a good powwow? That is exactly what he does. The I and the me converse with each other. And what does the I say to the me? It says, I will arise and go unto my Father. I will stop being this personal man of duality, doubt, fear, sin, selfishness, and limitation, and start being the Christ man of dominion, power, harmony, happiness, and prosperity. I will embody the Christ in everything that I think, say, and do. What is not right in my experience will be adjusted. What is sick will be made well. What is sinful will be made pure. What is weak will be made strong. What is poor will be made rich. The prodigal's hunger is your hunger. His mistakes are your mistakes. His extremity is your extremity. His frustration is your frustration. His emptiness is your emptiness. He tried to satisfy one part of himself at the expense of another part, and it didn't work for him any more than it does for you. What a shock it must have been when he saw the mess he had made of things. Then out of the depth of his loneliness and desolation came the voice. You do not need to stay the way you are. You do not need to stay in the filth and stench of the pig pen. Leave that old self which has separated you from your birthright. Get back home. Get right with yourself. Do you hear the voice saying to you, let the creative purpose of God be expressed in you? Then came the transformation, first the great awakening, and when he came to himself, then the great decision. I will arise and go to my Father and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned. The first step in correcting a mistake is to acknowledge that you have made it. The second step is to seek forgiveness for it. Your forgiveness of yourself and the forgiveness of the one you have injured. The prodigal is tired of this character he had assumed. Trouble, he is so hedged round him that he is willing to do anything. I will arise and go to my Father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of your hired servants. This is quite a come down. He is asking to be demoted. He is willing to do anything. He has lost his false pride. He has recognized the nothingness of personality. He has become receptive to the idea of his place in his Father's house, of his true purpose in life. Notice a difference in his attitude. When he left his father's house, he said, "Give me." When he returned, he said, "Make me." Between these two attitudes is a difference between poverty and plenty. The prodigal's difficulty, you see, was that he was trying to live by bread alone. He was like many truth students who seek answers and results without discipline and without surrender to the principle, who seek the abundance of the Father's house without developing the consciousness that produces it. The prodigal wanted success, but he got failure. He wanted happiness, but he got sorrow. He wanted thrills, but he got boredom and monotony. He has reached the limit of his endurance. He is reversing all the beliefs, ideals, and thoughts that have betrayed him. He is rooting them out. He is determined to be a son again and is ready to do anything to reclaim his rightful inheritance. Make me. The important thing now is not what he can get from his Father, but what the Father can accomplish through him. Make me is really the key to the Father's house, and no one can enter without it. To be forgiven, you must repent. You must reverse your thought. You must change it out of the old condition and keep a change into the new. It is not enough to feel sorry for your sin. You must surrender to it. If you want to be forgiven, you must not only accept the forgiveness, which is already given, but you must stop sinning. Now comes the great moment. As the Son turns toward the Father turns towards the Son. When he was yet a great way off, his Father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. There was no penalty for his waywardness, no penance for his sin, no reproof for his profligacy, no probation. The cancellation of his Son was complete. Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear, God said. All you need do is to change your attitude to take the step homeward. Eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither hath entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. The Son returned to his Father's house, and there is a great rejoicing. Everything is showered upon him, the ring, the best robe, the fatted calf, new shoes, the luxuries of home. But there was another son who had faithfully stayed at home. With him, too, you are identified. He glorified in his sense of martyrdom. He was filled with self-pity and envy. He grumbled to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed of any time thy commandment, and yet thou never gavest me a kid that I might marry with my friends. What was his father's response? Just what the Father says to you when your human nature makes grumbling comparisons. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. When he came to himself, in Orthodox religion, such a changeover as the prodigal son experienced is called a conversion. In metaphysical science, it is a change of consciousness. William James, the great psychologist, defines it as the process gradual or sudden, by which a self, hereto divided and consciously wrong and unhappy, becomes unified and consciously right and happy, in consequence of its former held-on religious realities. Putting it very simply, it is just a matter of coming to terms with yourself, of getting on the right basis with your Father. Do you see what Jesus is pointing out in this story? He is showing the two possibilities within you. You were born free, but you can use your freedom in any way that you choose. You can live on the heights of spiritual consciousness, or you can live in the depths of human consciousness. You can choose to think wrong, or you can choose to think right. You can remain where you are, or you can live in the Father's house. You can live with the greedy self, or you can live with the generous self. You can live with the careless self, or you can live with the careful self. You can live with the worst self, or you can live with your best self. God has given you that power, and you can use it as your will. You were born into this world both human and divine. You have a human, personal body which is subject to sin, sickness, and death, and you have a spiritual body subject only to God. So there is a choice to be made. You must decide whether you're going to live in the fugitive, transitory self of clay and personality, or in the Christ self of spirit and truth. You must decide on which side of your nature you're going to act, think, and live. And when he came to himself, a voice said, Get busy, straighten yourself out, let your Christ self take over. Do you too hear that voice? Your problems have to do with this very nature. They tell you that there is an adjustment in consciousness which must be made. They indicate your need to unify your outer self with the inner self, for personality is the cause of all your troubles. When you can say with St. Paul, It is no longer I, my personality that live, but Christ that liveth in me, the barrier between you and your God will be broken down. By leaving his father's house, the prodigal son automatically cut himself off from his source. He was like the people of whom Jeremiah wrote, For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed them out of cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. My people, you and you and you and I have forsaken the source. We have made cisterns that cannot hold the precious substance of life. What is the basic lesson in this parable? It is this. If you want to be successful, if you want to be well, if you want to be prosperous, if you want to attract the best from life, you must stay home. You must maintain your oneness with God. You must know Him at the center of your being. God does not run after you when you leave His house. He lets you work out your own salvation. He lets you find yourself. He knows nothing outside Himself by which to divide or to separate Himself. In fact, He doesn't even know that you have gone away. If He did know that you are away, you could never come back. What God knows is unchangeable. The Father's house is not a beautiful building up in the sky or a place that has to be reached through death. It is a state of mind which anyone can have. It has no location in time or space, but it is just as real as the physical house in which you live. Think of it as a state of consciousness in which you can discover that the all good is yours when you claim it. It is in you, as you. It is you. How do you know that this is true? How do you know that anything you identify yourself with cannot be detached from you? Because that is the only way you can know about anything. What takes place outside your mind you know nothing about. The Father's house is to you what you are to it, for it is a mental and spiritual state which you establish for yourself. Do you see now why you have never been in that flesh and body of yours, and why there is no way in which you could ever get into it? It is because it is in you. The spiritual you is above the body and not subject to it. You can think about your body, but your body cannot think about you. You can move your body around, but your body cannot move you or itself around. It is governed by your consciousness and your thought about it. How then does your body get so much power in your experience? How does it attract sickness, disease, pain, misery, and disorder? Why does it give you trouble? Because you have traded places with it. You stop being one and you have become two. When you forgot that the Creator and the created are one, that matter is spirit made manifest, the spiritual and the physical ceased to operate together, personality took over. We all learn sooner or later that personality is the prodigal son in the far country. It is that self which wastes its substance and fills our hospitals, sanitariums, and cemeteries. Every day the newspapers tell us about someone whose me has gotten out of hand. They go into great detail about the pitfalls, temptations, and dangers which surround him, the accidents, tragedies, and mishaps which befall him, and the penalties and punishments which are meted out to him. One day he is strong and the next day weak. One day he is on the mountaintop and the next day he is in the valley. One day he is reaching from the stars and the next day he is slipping in the mind. Untouched by spirit, he believes more in the power of evil than in the power of good. He misuses and subverts his power. He is slow to recognize God's presence in time of trouble. Living on a circumference, he finds the greater forces within him dormant. Seeing everything with a view to his own advantage, he closes the channels through which he receives sustenance. When the mind is divided, personality is always in trouble because it makes wrong choices. Why did Jesus represent personality as living in a far country? Because of its limited material existence, shut off from its source, it must of necessity experience both famine and want. Living in a state of apartness, man not only lives beyond his mental equivalent, but overdraws his material and physical resources. He does not have the strength to match his proposed effort, judging according to appearances. He serves his troubles instead of rising above them. Trading his spiritual liberty for material security, he loses both. Living in a state of self-reference, he makes his own frustrations. But there is merriment and rejoicing in the Father's house now. The prodigal has returned and has been accepted with joy. It is the joy which Isaiah felt when he said, "The mountains and the hills shall break forth before you into singing, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands," which Job experienced as he heard the Lord in the whirlwind and said, "Where wast thou when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" It is the euphoria which the Greek named to describe the state in which everything is in balance. It is the joy of the shepherd when he found the lost sheep. It is the joy of the woman when she found her coin. It is the joy of a mother when her son returns from war unharmed. It is the joy of a family when a loved one returns home from the hospital healed. The Father's house is a blaze of light. Happiness fills the air. There is music, dancing, and feasting. It is a momentous occasion. A reconciliation has been made. A divided mind has been united. The broken has been made whole. Communication has been restored. Is there anything in the story of the prodigal son that is not your story? Well, that depends upon whether you are reading it in past or present tense. If you have seen yourself in the role of the prodigal in every circumstance, the wonder of it has come flooding over you. You know that you can return to your true home and find that your problems are already solved and your needs already fulfilled. Do you feel the blessings that are being showered upon you in this glorious homecoming? In the eyes of God, you, the spiritual you, are the most important individual in the world. You have accepted heaven as your own state of mind and have lost your sense of separation from God. You know yourself as a son. You are the temple of the living God. You are the center of the universe. You are every man in one. You are that point in consciousness at which the invisible becomes visible. You are not merely the personal man patched up by medicines, serums, vaccinations, and operations. You are the bright, born anew, fresh, clean, pure, stainless, incorruptible body of Christ. You are that self that goes where it will, that knows no barrier, obstacle, circumstance, limitation, or condition. You are the unlimited, untrampled, unsullied, unconditioned being of light. Your eye is single to the truth, and you are one with all creation. You are governed by divine intelligence. You are directed by divine guidance. The freedom of God is your freedom. The mind of God is your mind. The life of God is your life. The power of God is your power. The health of God is your health. The joy of God is your joy. The strength of God is your strength. You do not beg God to make you whole. You accept the wholeness which is already yours. He whom you touch is instantly transformed. Men will call it demonstration, but you know it as revelation. Your demonstrations are assured because you have accepted your divinity here and now. Knowing yourself as spirit, you demonstrate the divine nature. You do not choose between good and evil, for you know only good. You are free as God is free. You are perfect as God is perfect. Having accepted your oneness, you have no power to feel as separate from God. Knowing that personality can betray you at any time, you have separated yourself from the personal man. You are not conformed to this world. You have spiritualized your consciousness to a point of which the world makes no more claim upon it. Having been twice born, born of the flesh and born of the spirit, you are above the law of the circumstance world and no longer subject to it. You are able to say with St. John, "And we know that the Son of God is come, and hath given us an understanding, that we may know him that is true, and we are in him that is true, even in his Son, Jesus Christ." Reread the story the next time your thought runs like this. Look at the mess I'm in. What am I doing here? Why aren't my prayers answered? Why don't I get results? Why doesn't the law work for me? Why am I always in debt? Why am I always sick? Why can't I get along with people? Why does everything turn out wrong? I believe in spiritual therapy, but I just don't seem to get anywhere. When progress slows down, take stock of your mental condition and determine whether you are working from the outside or from the inside, from the conditioned or the unconditioned, from the limited or from the unlimited, from the relative or from the absolute. This parable is not a story to be read. It is a pattern to be followed. It is a rule of life. Such were some of you, but ye are washed, but ye are sanctified. Follow the rule and you get results. In the experience, self comes alive. By linking yourself to greatness, you are lifted into greatness. It is wonderful to know that you are such an important and unique individual. It is wonderful to know that you are so much bigger and better than you thought you were, and that you are entitled to so much more happiness, success, and joy than you have been getting. You do not have to take my word for all of this. Just put yourself into the way of being found by God. If thou seek him, you will be found of thee. Your desires will be fulfilled. The Father said, "Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine." You have what God has. The all is within you. It is never outside of you, for it is you. When you have identified yourself with the truth of being, life can never be disappointing, discouraging, or unproductive again. Your thought is creative, and your prayers are answered. Nothing good is withheld from you. Nothing good can be separated from you. That which belongs to you will come to you. That which does not belong to you, you cannot have. Questions and answers. 1. What were the prodigal's greatest mistakes? Answer. He tried to separate part of God's good for himself. He lost his sense of dependence on God. 2. Why did the prodigal son meet difficulty and limitation after his separation from the father? Answer. Because the resources of his lower self dried up. 3. What happened when the prodigal son came to himself? Answer. He realized that since he was made in the image and likeness of God, his good depended upon his acknowledgement of that fact. He came to the realization at last that freedom is not in separation from his father, but in union with him. In this union, he found the good he was seeking. As he turned to the Father turned toward him. As he lifted his thoughts to the Father advanced to meet him, and he accepted his identity as a spiritual being. 4. My problems today are greater than those of the son in the story, for living grows more and more complicated as the world grows larger. Answer. There are forces beating in on me that he never thought of. What must I do to achieve integration? Realize that your responsibility is for your own thinking, your own speaking, your own action, and that mass thought, racial fears, taboos, and childhood conditioning have no power to hold you. You know the truth that makes man free. Don't let personality act to take either credit or blame. Hold fast to the thought of your oneness with God. Live in such truth as these. I and my Father are one. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the work. I do nothing of myself. As you, Father, art in me, and I in thee. Enlarge your concept of God to include intelligence, knowledge, understanding, love, life, truth, peace, beauty, order, health, wholeness, supply, and think on these things. End of chapter.